They want you tired. They want you drained. Because the person who always puts others first is predictable, pliable, easy to guilt, easy to use. They don't admire your generosity. They exploit it. And the most dangerous part, you let them. You call it love. You call it loyalty. But deep down, doesn't it feel more like slow erosion than devotion? How many times have you silenced your own needs to keep the peace? How often have you burned for people who wouldn't even light a match for you? This isn't compassion. This is self-betrayal in a mask, and it tears you apart from the inside out. Stoicism teaches us that the highest good is living in accordance with nature, and nature does not reward what weakens its foundation. Self-neglect is not a virtue. It is a fracture, and no structure can endure if its core is crumbling. In this video, we strip away the lies, the guilt, the conditioning, and we rebuild from within. If you're ready to reclaim your life, not through rage, but through reason, then please subscribe as a quiet commitment to yourself, a step toward sovereignty, toward stillness, toward the strength you were never meant to give away. Everything in life, whether a galaxy, a household, or a mind, revolves around a center. And if that center becomes unstable, everything orbiting it begins to unravel. You don't have to look far to see it. Think of the person who gives and gives, who says yes to every demand, who absorbs every crisis. Look a little closer, and you'll see what they rarely admit: resentment, fatigue, and the quiet collapse of someone who no longer recognizes themselves. The truth is, most people aren't falling apart because of one big blow. They crumble because they've neglected their own foundation for too long. Stoicism reminds us that clarity of mind and strength of soul aren't luxuries, they are duties. If you're not centered, you are reactive. If you are reactive, you're not living, you're being pushed. And when the world starts shaking, if you are not anchored in your own principles, emotions, and self-worth, then every demand, every opinion, every storm will carry you somewhere you didn't choose to go. You are the center of your reality, not in an arrogant sense, but in a structural one. If your mind is fragmented, your relationships suffer. If your energy is constantly pulled in 10 different directions, your vision gets blurry. You can't build anything meaningful when you're constantly rebuilding yourself. And yet, that's what so many people do. They live in fragments. Moments of peace interrupted by waves of guilt. Spurts of focus drowned by endless distractions. Attempts at self-care hijacked by the next emergency. That's not life. That's survival on a loop. A person who doesn't hold their own center isn't just weak, they're vulnerable to being shaped by the chaos around them. You start living on other people's timelines, fulfilling other people's expectations, solving other people's problems. And all the while, your inner compass gets quieter, your values blur, your boundaries dissolve. The Stoics understood this long before modern psychology caught up. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts." That's not a motivational quote, it's an instruction. What you allow at your center will shape the orbit of your life. Holding your center means something deeper than setting boundaries or having a morning routine. It's a vow, a commitment to not betray yourself just to be accepted. It means recognizing that your peace is your responsibility, not a side effect of external conditions. You can't wait for the world to quiet down before you center yourself, because the world won't. There will always be someone who needs something, always some fire to put out, always a reason to abandon yourself just one more time. But eventually, you realize that putting yourself last doesn't make you noble. It makes you unstable. And instability, no matter how well-meaning, is dangerous. You cannot give from a foundation that's cracked. You cannot lead when you're lost in your own fog. And you cannot love At least not well, if you're constantly abandoning yourself in the process. There's a difference between helping and being consumed, between support and surrender, between patience and self-erasure. The center must hold, and if you don't make that your priority, no one else will. Life doesn't reward you for overextending. It doesn't hand out medals for exhaustion. What it gives you are consequences. Fatigue that becomes bitterness, over-accommodation that becomes invisibility, emotional labor that becomes resentment. And once those seeds are planted, it's only a matter of time before they grow into quiet anger. At others, yes, but mostly at yourself. The person you see in the mirror every morning deserves more than that. They deserve protection, not from the world, but from the version of you that keeps putting them last. To center yourself isn't to shut the world out. It's to stop letting the world rearrange you. It's choosing clarity when confusion is easy. Choosing self-command when it's tempting to chase approval. It's the internal discipline of saying, I will not abandon myself today, no matter what happens. That's strength, that's stillness, that's sovereignty. Carl Jung once said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But how can you ever become that person if your center is constantly shifting to accommodate everyone else? You can't, not fully, and certainly not sustainably. The world doesn't need more people running on fumes. It doesn't need more martyrs. What it needs are individuals who are deeply anchored in themselves, people who respond instead of react, people who choose their values over their impulses, people who can stand in the storm and not be swept away by every gust of opinion, crisis, or need. You don't owe the world your collapse. You owe it your clarity. You don't owe people your constant availability. You owe them your grounded presence. And you can't offer either if you keep abandoning your center in the name of being good, liked, or needed. It's tempting to think that putting yourself first is selfish, that prioritizing your peace is a betrayal of those you care about. But it's the opposite. When your mind is clear, your love is stronger. When your values are intact, your actions are more intentional. When you operate from a place of stillness rather than scattered desperation, everything you give becomes more powerful. That's what the Stoics meant when they talked about living in accordance with nature. Your structure, your role. And nature does not thrive in disarray. It thrives through order, through flow, through design. You are not separate from that. You are that. So ask yourself truthfully, what is orbiting around your center right now? Is it built on guilt, fear, or chaos? Or is it built on principle, discipline, and clarity? Because whatever sits at your center, whether consciously chosen or unconsciously tolerated, will define the shape of your life. And the longer you ignore that center, the harder it becomes to recognize who you are beneath the noise. But you can change that, not with a dramatic shift, but with a steady return. A daily vow, I return to myself. I hold. I do not bend for approval. I do not break for acceptance. I hold. Seneca warned, if you do not know to which port you are sailing, no wind is favorable. Let that sink in. If your center is unstable, even opportunities become distractions. Even help becomes a crutch. Even love becomes a leash. Without direction, everything is noise. But with a solid center, even chaos becomes manageable. You respond instead of collapse. You move with purpose instead of panic. You create from order instead of react from lack. This isn't about being emotionless or cold. It's about being sovereign, self-governed, disciplined, not in denial, but in direction. The person who centers themselves becomes a force, calm, not because the world is quiet, but because they are, focused, not because there's nothing to distract, but because they've chosen what matters. That's not selfishness, that's wisdom. You were not born to scatter your soul across 1,000 emergencies. You were meant to be solid, steady, the still point in the turning world, the one who remembers what matters when everyone else forgets. And that starts not with action, but with anchoring. The center must hold. Let that be your starting point, not just today, but every day. Because everything else, your relationships, your work, your legacy, depends on it. Disappearance rarely arrives with a bang. It's quiet, subtle, unannounced. It begins in small, forgettable ways. The nod when you wanted to shake your head. The yes that barely escaped your lips when your chest screamed no. The silence you offered just to avoid making someone else uncomfortable. You keep telling yourself it's nothing, it's just once, just this time, just to keep the peace. But those little fractures in your will, those tiny betrayals of your own voice, they don't just go away, they accumulate. You chip away at yourself one silent compromise at a time, until one day you look around and realize the life you're living feels foreign, like you're performing a role someone else wrote, like you're still breathing, but you're not really there. This is the slow disappearance, the erosion of self that doesn't show up as a crisis, but as numbness. You wake up and go through motions, not choices. You listen to people's needs, but forget how to name your own. You show up where you're needed, but can't remember the last time you were where you wanted to be. That's how self-neglect works. It doesn't take your life away, it makes you surrender it piece by piece. And no one around you sounds the alarm, because to them, you still look functional. You still smile, still contribute, still meet expectations. But they're not the ones who notice what you lost. You are, and you feel it, not with panic, but with a dull, quiet ache that grows heavier the longer you ignore it. Most people don't vanish because the world erases them. They vanish because they step out of their own frame. They let other voices speak louder than their own. They mistake self-sacrifice for love, over-accommodation for virtue, and people-pleasing for peace. But what you bury doesn't disappear. It waits. And the longer you wait to return to yourself, the harder it becomes to find what you abandoned. The truth is, people don't need your disappearance to love you. If they do, it was never love. It was convenience. Stoic philosophy teaches us to align our actions with reason and virtue, but that alignment cannot happen when you treat your own needs as disposable. What is reasonable about betraying your own integrity for temporary harmony? What is virtuous about becoming invisible in your own story? It's a strange kind of grief, to miss yourself while still being alive. But that's what happens when you no longer feel rooted in your choices. When every decision is shaped by external demand rather than internal clarity. You may still be doing things, working, helping, fixing, but it's different. It's not creation, it's containment, not contribution, but compensation. You feel the weight of everyone else's expectations pressing against a self that hasn't had space to breathe in months, maybe years. And eventually, that self gets quieter. Not because it's weak, but because you stopped listening. Carl Jung once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. Not because the self is so dark, but because it requires full presence. And full presence doesn't allow for constant escape. To truly accept yourself, you must first acknowledge how far you've drifted. How many times you told yourself, 'I'll come back to me later,' and how often later never came. It's easier to give than to reflect. Easier to serve others than to sit in the discomfort of unmet desires and unexplored dreams. But avoidance is not peace. And giving your life to others without giving yourself a home inside it first is not love. It's exile. You were not meant to fade. Not meant to live behind the curtain while others take center stage in your time, your choices, your energy. And you don't reclaim yourself by screaming to be seen. You reclaim yourself by noticing. Noticing when you're shrinking instead of standing. Noticing when you're editing your truth for the comfort of others. noticing when your presence feels performative instead of genuine. These moments are not failures, they're signals that it's time to return. There's a quiet strength in choosing yourself again, not loudly, not defensively, just clearly. A slow return to honesty, to boundaries, to speaking, even when your voice shakes, to choosing your pace, even when the world rushes you, to honoring the small things, rest, solitude, reflection, because you finally remember that your value isn't in how much you give, but in how fully you exist. Epictetus reminded us, know first who you are, and then adorn yourself accordingly. But how can you adorn a self you haven't met in months? How can you stand tall in a structure you've allowed others to redesign? This isn't about pushing people away. It's about returning to the one person you'll live with every second of your life, yourself. That relationship between you and your mind, you and your body, you and your breath, is the most sacred and the most often neglected. You show up for birthdays, for deadlines, for favors. But how often do you show up for your own discomfort without turning it off? How often do you ask yourself what you truly need and wait for the honest answer? Without distraction, without guilt, without the impulse to fix, perform, or please. You don't need a full reinvention to return. You just need one choice at a time, one boundary restored, 1 hour protected, one truth spoken. That's how the reappearance begins. That's how the self returns from exile, not with fanfare, but with alignment. Slowly, the fog starts to lift. You notice your breath again. Your decisions feel deliberate. You start to recognize the sound of your own mind, unfiltered, not shaped by what others want to hear. That's when you realize you never really disappeared. You were just buried beneath the noise. Seneca wrote, "No person hands out their money to passers-by, but to how many do each of us hand out our lives? You owe it to yourself to stop handing away your hours, your energy, your essence like it's spare change. Your life is not loose currency for anyone's agenda. It's sacred territory, and it deserves your presence, not just in the dramatic moments, but in the quiet ones, in how you choose to spend your afternoon, in how you speak to yourself before bed, in how you carry your soul through the small, ordinary moments that no one claps for. You're not weak because you've drifted. You're human. It happens. What matters now is not guilt, but clarity, not regret, but return. The most courageous thing you can do in a world that rewards distraction is to come home to yourself, to stop looking outward for permission and start listening inward for direction. The voice inside you may be faint, but it hasn't disappeared. And every time you honor it, you get louder, not in volume, but in presence. So this is your quiet reminder. You're still here. You haven't been erased. You've just been away. But the return is always available. And it starts with the simplest, most radical act of all, choosing not to vanish anymore, choosing to stay, choosing to be, choosing to matter to yourself again. The world might not notice the difference at first, but you will. And in time, they'll feel it too, not because you demand it, but because your presence becomes undeniable. That's how reappearance begins, and that's how it stays. Strength doesn't just show up one day and decide to stay. It's not something you inherit, and it's not something you luck into. It's built, slowly, deliberately, and constantly. The illusion most people fall into is thinking that once they reach a certain level of mental clarity, emotional resilience, or physical health, they can relax, that somehow the work is over. But strength is not a destination, it's a discipline, a muscle. And if you stop using it, if you stop feeding it, if you stop respecting it, it doesn't stay. It fades, not loudly, but gradually. A little less focus here, a little less intention there, until one day, the clarity you once had feels distant. The stability you once lived in starts to shake. There's a quiet cost to neglecting what grounds you. When you don't maintain your internal structure, you slowly become reactive. Life doesn't stop just because you did. The challenges, the stress, the noise, they continue. And if you're not anchored, you start slipping. You find yourself more easily overwhelmed, more easily distracted, more easily controlled. That's the part no one tells you. If you don't maintain your strength, someone or something else will shape your weakness. And the more you outsource your stability, the more fragile your life becomes. You might not feel it at first. You might even convince yourself everything's fine. But under the surface, your foundation is thinning. And it only takes one storm to find out how hollow your shelter has become. Discipline is what builds the structure you live in. It's the invisible architecture that supports everything else. When you eat well, train your body, guard your time, and think deeply, you're not just doing self-care. You're protecting your capacity. You're keeping the engine alive. Because life will make demands of you whether you're ready or not. And if you don't have something solid to meet those demands, you'll collapse under the weight of what should have been manageable. Epictetus once said, "No great thing is created suddenly. Strength is not something you practice only when things are falling apart. It's what you build so that they don't." There's a reason the Stoics emphasized preparation. Because they understood that adversity isn't a possibility, it's a guarantee. And when it arrives, you won't have time to build your armor. You either show up ready or you don't. The people who appear unshakable in times of crisis didn't get lucky. They practiced. They practiced discipline on the days they didn't feel like it. They practiced reflection when distraction was more tempting. They practiced silence in a world that profits off noise. Strength is not built during applause. It's built in solitude, in the hours no one sees, in the habits no one praises. That's where you find out who you're becoming, and that's what decides how well you'll hold when the pressure comes. People often confuse strength with intensity, as if being fired up for a few weeks or months is enough to carry them through life. But strength isn't built on emotion. It's built on repetition, on showing up, not in grand gestures, but in the ordinary, unglamorous discipline of consistency. Your health doesn't maintain itself because you exercised once. Your focus doesn't remain sharp because you meditated last week. Your emotional control doesn't stick because you journaled during a hard time. These are practices, not events. And if they don't stay alive in your routine, they die in your reality. It's easy to want to be strong. It's much harder to commit to the systems that make you strong. That means saying no when it's inconvenient, choosing solitude when the noise is loud, resisting comfort when it's calling your name. It means walking into your morning not with chaos, but with intention, knowing that every small discipline, what you eat, how you speak to yourself, how you respond to conflict, is shaping the version of you that will face tomorrow. The future isn't just coming. You're building it, one choice at a time. And the structure you walk into 5 years from now will be made from what you did today, especially when no one was watching. Carl Jung wrote, "What you do not make conscious will rule you, and you will call it fate." Let that sink in. If you don't consciously maintain your internal order, you will be at the mercy of chaos disguised as coincidence. You'll look at your life and call it bad luck or timing, when in truth, you simply didn't reinforce your foundation when you had the chance. Strength isn't about control, it's about consciousness, about knowing where your edges are and choosing to reinforce them rather than ignore them. That kind of strength can't be faked, and it can't be rushed. When you take yourself seriously, everything changes. You begin to see that your time is not disposable. Your energy is not renewable without care. Your attention is not something to hand out freely. And when you treat these things as sacred, the world begins to adjust. Not always kindly, but it adjusts. People start to recognize your limits. Your presence becomes more grounded, your voice more stable. That's the outcome of maintenance. It's not about becoming rigid, it's about becoming reliable. You become someone others can trust, not because you're always agreeable, but because you're consistent, clear, solid. Seneca reminded us, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it. And most of what we waste isn't lost in distraction, it's lost in repair, in constantly fixing what we let fall apart, in always trying to catch up because we didn't stay ready." Maintenance may seem tedious, but crisis is even more demanding. Choose your effort wisely. You will either invest in keeping your strength or pay the price for abandoning it. One is uncomfortable by design, the other is painful by consequence. What's remarkable is how much stability you can build with just a few daily non-negotiables. A walk, a pause before speaking, 10 minutes of quiet reflection, a deliberate breath before reacting. These are not signs of weakness, they are signs of command. The person who integrates discipline into their daily life doesn't need to scream their strength. It's felt in how they move, how they choose, how they hold their ground when others rush to please. That's the strength you build, not to dominate, but to remain unmoved when the world around you is shifting. You don't have to do everything, but you do have to do what sustains you. Because if you don't, if you let the foundation crack, don't be shocked when everything starts to slip. You can't be surprised by fatigue when you ignore sleep. You can't be surprised by anxiety when your mind is a dumping ground for noise. You can't be surprised by weakness when you haven't trained your will. Life gives back what you put in, not immediately, but inevitably. And when it feels hard, when the structure is heavy and the effort feels invisible, remember why you started. You didn't commit to discipline because it was easy. You committed because you wanted to be free. Free from chaos, free from weakness, free from being tossed by every demand, every emotion, every setback. You maintain your strength so you don't collapse in moments that matter. You do the work now so you don't have to rebuild later. Plato once said, "The first and best victory is to conquer self." That victory doesn't happen once. It happens every morning you get up and choose structure over entropy, peace over indulgence, purpose over drift. So don't wait for collapse to remind you of what you should have protected. Guard your mind, move your body, feed your clarity, respect your rhythm. These are not trends, they are tools. And when used with consistency, they do more than build strength. They build the kind of life that holds, no matter what comes. Strength demands maintenance, and maintenance is love disguised as discipline. You either care enough to preserve yourself, or you surrender to slow erosion. And if you're listening to this, you already know which path you were meant to walk. Choose it again, today, and every day after. It's rarely the big explosions that drain you. It's the tiny leaks, the moments where you explain yourself 3 more times than you needed to. The times you said yes with a forced smile when everything in you begged for a no. The reflexive apologies that slipped out even though you did nothing wrong. These aren't just habits, they're energy drains. Every small compromise in your emotional boundaries doesn't just take a piece of your peace, it chips away at your presence. And over time, that adds up to something heavy, something that makes you feel like you're carrying everyone else's weight while slowly forgetting how to stand tall in your own. It's not always easy to see it happening. You might think you're just being kind, accommodating, cooperative, but underneath that smile is fatigue. Quiet, constant fatigue. Not the kind that sleep can fix, but the kind that comes from giving too much of yourself away without ever returning home to refill. You feel stretched thin, unnoticed, resentful. and that resentment grows in the places where your boundaries used to be. That's the cost of emotional leakage. It doesn't just deplete your mood, it weakens your clarity. And when clarity goes, confusion walks in and starts making your choices for you. Stoic philosophy has always taught that guarding your inner world is the foundation of peace. Because once someone gains control of your emotions, they control you, not with force, but with guilt, with manipulation, with expectation, and you begin to shape your behavior around other people's reactions. You tiptoe, you edit your truth, you seek approval in the very places that continue to drain you. And it's subtle. You don't even realize how much you're being pulled until you find yourself mentally rehearsing conversations, walking on eggshells, shrinking your expression just to keep things smooth. But smooth for who, and at what cost? Emotional energy is like a currency, and most people are overspending. You give it away in arguments you should have walked past, in situations you should have exited, in silence you should have broken. Not all emotional expression is harmful, but unguarded, constant expression without discernment, that's exhaustion disguised as connection, and that's what wears you down the most. You don't need to give every reaction a voice. You don't need to validate every feeling someone else projects onto you. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is to stay calm, not because you're suppressing, but because you're choosing not to bleed for what doesn't deserve a wound. Carl Jung once said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." But that understanding can only happen when you stop giving all your emotional power away, when you pause before reacting, when you let space enter between the stimulus and your response. That space is where clarity lives. It's where you remember that not every comment needs a defense, that not every question deserves an answer, that not every frown is your responsibility to fix. You begin to reclaim your emotional sovereignty, not by closing off, but by filtering what actually requires your energy. There's something dignified about restraint, not the kind that comes from fear, but the kind that comes from wisdom. The person who leaks emotions at every turn might appear expressive, but beneath that expression often lies instability. When your emotions are always on display, you become predictable, and predictability in the wrong hands makes you manipulable. The Stoics taught us that a wise person is not cold, they are composed. They feel everything, but they don't let everything move them. That's the difference between reacting and responding. One is unconscious, the other is disciplined. It's not about becoming emotionless. It's about becoming deliberate, knowing when to speak, when to stay silent, when to feel fully, and when to pull back and observe. You don't need to put on armor made of indifference. You need to build a filter of self-respect. One that asks, is this worth my energy? Is this drawing me closer to the life I want, or pulling me further from it? Is this conversation deepening connection or draining my clarity? When you start asking those questions, something shifts. You begin to preserve yourself, not out of defensiveness, but out of alignment. Seneca reminded us, we suffer more in imagination than in reality, and many of our emotional leaks stem from imagined responsibilities, from beliefs that we owe everyone an explanation, that we must be understood by all, that our value is tied to how agreeable we are. But those beliefs are lies dressed as virtue. You don't owe your energy to everyone who demands it. You don't owe your time to everyone who asks for it. You don't owe your attention to everything that flashes across your screen, across your day, across your mind. What you owe, deeply, unapologetically, is stewardship of your inner world. That is your sacred space, and no one should be allowed to rearrange it unless they've earned that right with presence, respect, and reciprocity. People will adjust to the emotional tone you set. If you're always available, always reacting, always explaining. They will expect that version of you forever. But the moment you start conserving your energy, the moment you begin to say, "not now," or simply remain silent, the balance shifts. They may resist it at first, but eventually they will recalibrate, or they will leave. And if they leave because you stopped leaking, then let them. That's not rejection, that's refinement. Aristotle once said, "Knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom, but knowing yourself is useless if you don't also protect yourself." Emotional boundaries are not just about others. They are about you learning to live with your own depth without letting it drown you. It means feeling everything but being mastered by nothing. It means walking through your day with a calm center that no one else can access unless you invite them in. It means reclaiming the right to decide what deserves your emotional investment. You don't have to be aggressive to be firm. You don't have to be loud to be powerful. Sometimes the strongest presence in the room is the one that feels no need to react, the one that knows when to engage and when to let the noise pass. That's not weakness, that's authority. And that authority is not given by the world. It's claimed by the one who stops leaking. Your strength is not in how much you feel, it's in how you manage what you feel. And if you let every disappointment, every comment, every misunderstanding occupy space inside you, you will eventually run out of room for peace. The human spirit is not limitless in capacity. It must be prioritized, pruned, protected. You can't grow in a garden where every weed is allowed to thrive. You must be intentional, not harsh, not closed, just conscious. So the next time you feel the pull to explain what needs no defense, pause. The next time you feel guilty for drawing a boundary, breathe through it. The next time someone projects their chaos onto you, return to your center. You are not obligated to hold what isn't yours, and you are not a vessel for everyone else's storms. What you are is a steward of energy, of clarity, of self. Let others call it distance if they must. Let them misunderstand your silence. Let them confuse your calm for indifference. You are not here to be decoded by everyone. You are here to be whole, and wholeness begins the moment you stop bleeding for things that never deserve to touch you. Emotional leaks cost more than you realize, but the moment you decide to stop them, you begin to restore something even more valuable: your presence, your power, your peace. And nothing is more worthy of protection than that. There's a quiet lie that many of us believe. It's the idea that giving everything we have to others makes us virtuous. We think, if I just keep giving, if I just keep showing up, I'll be seen as good, as selfless. But when we look a little closer, we realize that it's not always generosity at play. Sometimes what we call selflessness is really an unconscious desire to be needed. The truth is, when you give without boundaries, you're not simply being compassionate, you're trying to prove your worth, and in that process, you lose yourself. There's a difference between giving because you can and giving because you feel you must. The former comes from a place of abundance, where your own needs are met, and you have more to offer. The latter comes from a place of lack, where you pour out every last drop of yourself because you're afraid that if you stop, you won't matter. You're not offering love. You're offering your survival, hoping someone will fill the empty space you've created in yourself. But that's not kindness. It's a kind of emotional manipulation. You convince yourself that by giving, you'll get the approval, the recognition, the validation you crave. But in truth, you're just holding up a mirror to your own insecurity, and that's where overgiving starts to twist. Think about it. How often do you find yourself agreeing to things you don't want to do? Saying yes when your body says no? How many times have you gone out of your way to make someone else's life easier, only to feel drained and unnoticed afterward? This is the hidden cost of overgiving. It doesn't just deplete your energy, it strips away your clarity, your voice, your sense of self. You end up serving others at the expense of your own well-being, and when the dust settles, you realize you've neglected the most important relationship in your life, the one with yourself. Giving without boundaries isn't virtue, it's survival, and it's a survival that asks you to die a little more each time you give. True service comes from overflow, not depletion. When you're full, you can give freely because you have enough to share. You aren't sacrificing a part of yourself to do it. You're choosing to share what you already have. But if you're constantly bleeding to make others comfortable, you're not helping them. You're letting them define you. You're saying, "I'm not enough as I am, but maybe if I give enough, I'll finally prove my worth." But no amount of giving will ever make you feel whole if the foundation of your generosity is built on insecurity. It's like trying to fill a cup that has a hole in the bottom. No matter how much you pour into it, it will never stay full. And no matter how much you give, you will always feel empty. There's a deep denial in overgiving. It's a denial of your own needs, your own worth, and ultimately, your own humanity. You become so focused on filling the gaps in others' lives that you forget to tend to your own. You convince yourself that you're noble for enduring the exhaustion, for taking on the burdens of others. But the truth is, you're denying yourself the right to be nourished. You're denying yourself the right to rest, to heal, to reclaim your energy. And in doing so, you're eroding the very foundation of your strength. When you give until you're empty, you're not serving others. You're sacrificing yourself. And that's a dangerous game to play. It's not that giving is wrong. Far from it. The world needs more kindness, more support, more people who are willing to show up for others. But true giving comes from a place of strength, not depletion. When you give from your own abundance, you empower both yourself and others. But when you give from a place of neediness, you feed the cycle of self-doubt and insecurity. You may temporarily win people's admiration, but you lose your own sense of self-respect in the process. You're not a martyr, you're a vessel, one that can only serve as long as it remains full. And if you're constantly draining yourself, you won't have anything left to offer. But how can you become who you truly are if you're constantly bending yourself to please others? How can you step into your power if you're always giving it away? Overgiving isn't generosity. It's a refusal to acknowledge your own value. It's pretending that your worth is tied to what you do for others instead of who you are. The truth is, you are enough as you are. You don't need to prove your worth through endless sacrifice. You don't need to disappear into someone else's version of your life. True strength comes from the ability to give freely without losing yourself in the process. And that's something only you can cultivate. It's time to stop confusing self-sacrifice with virtue. It's time to stop pretending that the more you give, the more valuable you become. Your value is inherent, not earned through exhaustion. And the more you realize that, the less you'll feel the need to prove it to anyone. You don't need to bend over backward for others to see your worth. You simply need to stand tall, to hold your own space, and to choose when and how to give based on your own capacity, not out of obligation. Giving should come from a place of strength, not emptiness. It should be a choice, not a compulsion. When you stop overgiving, something incredible happens. You start to feel more whole, more present, more in tune with your own needs. You begin to recognize that your worth isn't in how much you sacrifice, it's in how much you respect yourself. And as you cultivate that respect, you'll find that your relationships grow deeper, not because you're giving more, but because you're showing up as your full self. The people who truly care about you will appreciate your presence, your energy, and your boundaries. They will respect you more when you respect yourself, and those who don't will naturally fall away, leaving you space to nurture the connections that actually feed you. Overgiving is a hidden form of pride because it says, "I will sacrifice myself to prove that I matter." But true service, true love, true strength comes from a place of abundance, not depletion. It comes from recognizing that your worth is not in what you give, but in who you are. And when you can stand in that truth, you'll find that the world doesn't need your sacrifice, it needs your strength. And that strength is rooted in honoring yourself first, not out of selfishness, but out of the deep, unwavering knowledge that you are enough as you are. And when you remember that, you'll have more than enough to give. We often hear the phrase, "The world is a reflection of what's inside us," but the reality is that the world doesn't always respond to who you are. It responds to how you treat yourself. Every interaction, every exchange, every relationship reflects something about your own self-worth. If you treat yourself as a secondary priority, others will too. If you consistently delay your own dreams to accommodate others, they won't suddenly start pushing you to chase those dreams. In fact, they'll likely take it as a sign that your dreams aren't as important as theirs. And that, my friend, is where things start to go wrong. When you diminish your own needs and desires for the sake of everyone else, you teach the world that your boundaries aren't strong enough to be respected. You teach people that you don't value yourself, and as a result, they won't either. At its core, the world doesn't value what you don't value. That's a tough pill to swallow. We like to think that people will see our worth, despite how we treat ourselves, that somehow they'll recognize our potential even when we don't honor it. But life doesn't work that way. We don't get what we deserve. We get what we tolerate. And every time you settle for less than what you truly want, you reinforce that belief. You teach people that your time, your energy, and your spirit are all negotiable. It's easy to point fingers at others for not treating us the way we deserve, but the real question is, how have we taught them to treat us? Take a moment and think about it. When was the last time you said yes when you meant no? When was the last time you put someone else's comfort ahead of your own well-being? That's not kindness, it's self-neglect. And the world notices. It's not that people are intentionally disrespecting you, it's that they've picked up on the fact that you don't respect yourself enough to draw clear lines. And when those boundaries aren't drawn, when the standards aren't set, others will come in and take what they can without a second thought. You can't blame them for it. They're simply responding to the message you've sent. You've shown them that your needs are secondary, that your dreams can wait, and in turn, they've accepted that. Carl Jung once said, "You are what you do, not what you say you'll do." This quote cuts right to the heart of the matter. It's easy to say we value ourselves, to speak words of self-respect, but the real measure of self-worth is in the actions we take. It's in the boundaries we set, the time we protect, the priorities we declare. And just like the universe responds to our actions, so do the people around us. If you act like your time isn't valuable, people will treat it like it's disposable. If you act like your dreams are negotiable, others will assume they don't matter. The harsh truth is that the way the world treats you is often a direct reflection of how you've taught it to treat you. This isn't to say that everyone will be intentionally malicious. Most of the time, it's not a conscious decision to take advantage of you. It's simply that when you don't set the standard for how you want to be treated, others will fill in that space. And unfortunately, not everyone is going to step up and treat you with the respect you deserve if you don't show them that you're worthy of it. It's not enough to expect others to respect you because of your potential or because you've quietly earned their admiration. The world doesn't read minds, it reads actions. And the way you present yourself, the way you honor your own needs and values, speaks louder than any words ever could. This is where the concept of self-respect becomes so vital. Self-respect isn't just about taking care of your body or maintaining a healthy routine. It's about recognizing your worth in every aspect of your life. It's about standing firm in your decisions, defending your time, and protecting your energy. When you show the world that you won't tolerate mistreatment or neglect, you teach others that your presence matters. You give them a blueprint for how they should treat you. And that blueprint is something you lay out through your daily choices. Do you stand up for your boundaries? Do you honor your own desires, or do you put them off for someone else's convenience? You might wonder how to begin this shift. How do you move from a place of self-neglect to a place where your needs come first, where the world starts reflecting your value back at you? The answer lies in small, consistent actions. It starts with you. It starts with the little moments, saying no when you mean it, drawing the line when you feel your boundaries being tested, refusing to tolerate disrespect, no matter how subtle. It's in how you treat yourself when no one is looking. The more you show up for your own needs, the more others will begin to show up for them too. People cannot respect what you don't respect. They cannot value what you don't value. And most importantly, they cannot give you the energy you've been withholding from yourself. We've all heard the saying, you can't pour from an empty cup, and it sounds cliché, but the truth is, it's spot on. When you don't prioritize yourself, when you don't fill your own cup, it becomes impossible to give from a place of abundance. You give because you feel obligated, not because you have the capacity to do so. And when that happens, you don't give love, you give exhaustion, you give resentment, and you give it at the cost of your own well-being. You teach the world that your energy is endless, when in reality, it's finite. And once that well runs dry, it's too late to fill it again. It's time to stop waiting for the world to validate your worth. The world isn't in charge of your value. You are. You are the one who gets to decide how you're treated, how you're regarded, and how you show up for yourself. The way you treat yourself is the foundation for everything that follows. If you treat yourself as essential, the world will follow suit. If you treat yourself as optional, the world will see you as just that, an afterthought. As you begin to honor your own needs, you'll start to notice something incredible happen. Not only do you feel more aligned, more grounded, but you also become more magnetic. The energy you radiate when you truly value yourself draws the right people toward you, people who respect your boundaries, people who see your worth, and people who encourage you to chase your dreams. This shift doesn't just change how others treat you, it transforms how you show up for yourself. And that's where everything begins. You stop seeking validation from the world, and instead, you start creating the life you've always wanted, built on the solid foundation of self-respect and true value. Remember, the world reflects how you treat yourself. And the first step to changing the reflection is changing how you see yourself. Stop settling. Start respecting yourself, and watch as the world starts to respond to the energy you give it. You teach people how to treat you, not with your words, but with your actions. You set the tone, you draw the lines, and you show the world exactly how much you matter. Boundaries often get a bad rap. People hear the word and think of walls, tall, cold, impassable structures designed to keep others out. But that's not what boundaries are. Boundaries aren't about blocking people or shutting them out. They're about setting clear spaces where you control what's allowed in. Imagine a door instead of a wall, a door that you open when it's right for you and close when it's not. It's not about keeping people away. It's about letting them in on your terms. It's about deciding who deserves your time, your attention, your energy. Because let's face it, you can't give everything to everyone. And the truth is, you shouldn't. In a world that constantly demands more, it can feel like you're supposed to be available to anyone and everyone at all times. But if you're always saying yes to other people's needs, when do you ever get to say yes to your own? Boundaries aren't walls. They're the healthy lines that allow you to protect the parts of you that are most sacred. Your peace, your energy, your creativity. These parts of you take time to build, and if neglected, they can take a long time to heal. When you don't have boundaries, you're essentially leaving your door wide open, letting anyone walk in, take what they need, and leave you depleted. And when you're drained, you have nothing left to give, not to yourself and not to others. There's a misconception that having boundaries makes you rude or selfish, that somehow if you don't give everything of yourself, you're failing to love or connect with people. But that's not love. That's surrender. Surrendering your time, your values, your mental space, and ultimately, your self-respect. You see, love isn't about endlessly giving until you have nothing left. Love is about understanding that you must first protect yourself in order to truly give. Just like a cup can only overflow with what it holds, your ability to give love, kindness, or support comes from the wellspring of your own well-being. And that wellspring needs protection. Without boundaries, you slowly drain yourself, and eventually you have nothing left to give, no matter how much you want to. It's important to understand that boundaries don't just protect your physical space, they protect your emotional space as well. Your thoughts, your feelings, your needs are just as deserving of respect. When you allow others to cross your emotional boundaries, you're allowing them to impose their needs and their emotions on yours. They begin to dictate your state of mind, your happiness, and your peace. That's not freedom, that's control. Setting boundaries means protecting your emotional sovereignty. It's not about closing yourself off, but about being selective about who and what gets to enter. And not everyone deserves access to the most vulnerable parts of you. Boundaries are your way of saying, I respect myself enough to decide who gets to share my energy. This is not about being rigid. Boundaries are not about rejecting people or shutting them out completely. They're about creating space for healthy, intentional relationships. They're about understanding that your time and your energy are valuable, and you get to decide how and when to share them. When you set boundaries, you're not just protecting yourself, you're also respecting the other person. You're teaching them how to treat you. You're saying, I am worthy of respect, and I am choosing where my energy goes. This is empowering. It shows others that you value yourself, and they should too. When you constantly give without boundaries, you teach people that you're always available, that you have endless energy, that your time doesn't matter. But when you have boundaries, you show them that your time and energy are precious, and you won't give them away without careful consideration. But how can you become who you truly are if you're always giving away pieces of yourself to others? How can you stand in your truth if you're constantly bending to accommodate the needs of others? Boundaries are the key to self-discovery because they allow you to create the space necessary to reflect, to grow, and to become. Without boundaries, you're constantly reshaping yourself to fit other people's expectations, and that's a recipe for living a life that isn't yours. Setting boundaries is an act of self-love and self-respect. It's about deciding that you deserve to be treated with care, and that includes protecting your own time, energy, and mental health. When you don't have boundaries, you let the world dictate the rhythm of your life. People ask for your time, your attention, your help, and you give without thinking. But when you say no, when you decide to protect your space, you start taking control of your life again. You start putting yourself first, not because you don't care about others, but because you know that without your well-being intact, you have nothing to offer. That's the strength of boundaries. They give you the power to show up as your best self, not just as a person who's worn out from meeting everyone else's needs. The truth is, the more you allow others to infringe on your boundaries, the more you lose yourself. You start to feel resentful, drained, overwhelmed, and eventually you become disconnected from the person you truly are. When you set clear boundaries, you reconnect with yourself. You remember who you are, what you value, and where you stand. You start to operate from a place of strength and clarity, rather than from a place of guilt and depletion. Your boundaries don't just protect you, they help you reclaim your life. Remember, boundaries are not walls, they're doors. They open when you choose. They close when you choose. They allow you to connect with others on your terms, not theirs. And in a world that's constantly pushing for more, for faster, for better, the ability to say no and to protect your time, your peace, and your energy is an act of power. It's not about shutting people out. It's about choosing who deserves to enter. It's about being aligned with your true self and making sure your relationships reflect that alignment. When you start protecting yourself, you'll find that the world respects you more, not less. And that's when you start to live life on your own terms, when you begin to understand that boundaries are not limitations, but liberations. Your boundaries are your birthright. They are the lines you draw to safeguard your peace, to protect your energy, and to ensure that you can give in a way that is healthy and sustainable. You are allowed to decide who gets access to your time, your attention, and your space. Don't let anyone make you feel guilty for choosing yourself. Don't let anyone convince you that saying no is rude. Boundaries are a reflection of self-respect, and self-respect is the foundation of all healthy relationships. When you set boundaries, you're teaching others how to treat you, and you're teaching yourself how to protect what matters most. Letting everyone in isn't love, it's surrender. Love doesn't require you to sacrifice yourself at the altar of others' needs. Love is built on respect, respect for yourself and respect for others. When you set boundaries, you're not just protecting your own peace, you're showing others that they too deserve to be in relationships that honor their boundaries. And that, my friend, is the key to building stronger, more meaningful connections. When you learn to guard your space, you make room for what truly matters, and that's where the magic happens. If someone were to watch how you spent every hour this week, what would they say about your priorities? Would they see you investing in what truly matters? Or would they notice that your time is spent on distractions, obligations, and the demands of others? Time doesn't lie. It's the clearest mirror of your values. How you spend your minutes and hours tells the world exactly where your focus lies, whether it's on growth, on relationships, or on the things that feed your purpose, or whether it's scattered across 1,000 things that leave you feeling empty by the end of the day. The truth is, if you don't guard your time like it's sacred, don't expect your life to feel meaningful. When you don't take ownership of your time, it starts slipping away from you, piece by piece, and before you know it, the years have passed, and you've been running on autopilot, living by the expectations of others, with little room left for what truly serves you. Every minute you give away thoughtlessly is a brick removed from the structure of your purpose. Your time is the foundation of everything you build. If you're not intentional with it, the things that truly matter to you, the passions, the dreams, the relationships, start to crumble. You may tell yourself that you're too busy to focus on what's important, but the truth is, you're too distracted. It's easy to get caught up in the cycle of endless tasks, emails, meetings, and obligations. But when you look back, how many of those things truly added value to your life? How many of them were just noise, things that demanded your attention but left you feeling drained, uninspired, and unfulfilled? The harsh reality is, you can't create a meaningful life if you keep giving away your time to things that don't align with your values. Your time is precious, and every moment spent on things that don't serve your true purpose is a moment you'll never get back. You can't just hope that one day you'll wake up and find your purpose. It's something you must carve out every single day by choosing where you place your focus and energy. This doesn't mean ignoring the responsibilities of life, but it does mean recognizing that those responsibilities should be balanced with your deeper goals. When you spend your time intentionally, when you give your energy to what truly matters, that's when you begin to build something meaningful. When you choose where your attention goes, you start constructing the life you want to live, not the one that others expect from you. Carl Jung once said, "Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes."